Hello, my name is Abhinav Angal, and we got this in our project group got the scenario to create something related to artificial intelligence and the brain to help individuals in California that suffer from earthquakes and other natural disasters. So while we were thinking about ideas, I came up with an idea that would help specifically firefighters. When natural disasters such as these occur, there are plenty of house areas and during earthquakes where houses go on fire, buildings go on fire, and it's necessary for firefighters to go in and save these individuals' lives. But what happens when these firefighters, under all their heavy equipment and their masks and the dangerous situations and circumstances they're put in, what if they miss an individual that is covered in fire or covered in flames, or they just can't hear the screaming because of all the creaking wood in the building? Like, what if they can't rely just on their senses on what they can see? What can you do? Like, what can these firefighters do? That's when I came up with an idea, a project called Infernal. Before we get into a more detailed description of the model I came up with, let's talk very briefly about the brain. So when you can't rely on your five senses, you obviously just can't go ahead and create a sixth, right? That's not how we humans are programmed. But what if you can enhance one of the senses that you do have? In this case, we'll be focusing on the occipital lobe and the vision area of the brain. Now, if you go to and look at the model I made, I call it the vertebrae, mostly because it almost looks like the vertebrae a human has. But in this case, we're going to start from the base. This base right here, it has little pricks at the bottom, which injects itself into the occipital lobe in the vision area in the brain. What happens once this does the inject itself is that inside of the long frame, in this case we'll call this the backbone. Inside of the backbone, there will be electrodes that ties itself to the eyes. The reason why there are electrodes inside of the backbone is because right here where it separates into both contact for the eyes, there is a chip. This chip, what it does is it regulates the difference between regular flames and body heat. See, the thing is, what this headgear is supposed to do is to, once put on, help the firefighters focus on what they're looking for, and that is human bodies. Whether dead or alive, we're trying to get as many humans we can out, correct? And so, what this does is the chip will help them focus on body heat. When they're going in, they don't have to rely just simply on screams and like what they can see, but they can actually see things. They can regulate the heat itself. Flames, in this case, like regular fire, will be seen as blue, and body heat will be seen as orange. Now, these lenses themselves are also protected by a rubber case, which means with a fireproof rubber case, which can also act as goggles. So in this way, we can also get rid of the entire goggles itself, as it will cover the entire face. This will also give enough space for a breathing mask, and this can also be covered with a helmet, and nothing else will be required to be taken away or get in the way of the equipment already used. Now, if we focus on the lenses here, the lenses work exactly like how a thermal scope would on a gun. What this does is it contains and focuses the infrared lights emitted by all objects in view. Now, this will be while this is all good and everything, and it works like a pretty much you're putting thermal scopes on these firefighters' eyes, which helps them find the difference between humans that you cannot see in these dangerous situations. But what if a human's body temperature and a fire were burning, it gave off the same heat, right? So that's where on these separate limbs inside on the backbone, these separate vertebrae on the backbone contain satellite nodes that relay the information the user sees. I came up with this idea as I was thinking about army strikes and military strikes. Or inside every strike team, there's always usually the captain or one member that has a camera that relays information back to an operational home base. So, what if the firefighters could also do the same thing, but in this case, whatever they see is also relayed back in thermal imaging back to a main base where where people dedicated to seeing and pointing out like information that these firefighters might have missed regardless of the technology that they were wearing. So once they whatever the firefighter sees will always be relayed back, so they could always go back on the way they went into the house. This could help them focus on their drills, make them feel like what they did wrong, go back and see what they missed out on, what could be and help them pretty much in future events such as these. This could all help them realize what they're missing out on, etc., etc. But that's for a different case. The whole point of the vertebrae, though, is to focus on imaging, on thermal heat that regulates the difference between humans and regular fires, so firefighters can go directly to these individuals and help them out. And that is the idea that I came up with, and this is the design for the idea that I did come up with. Thank you for listening.